and this is the third or fourth. This is the fourth guinea pig that I'm dealing with in my experiment of communicating with you, meaning you viewers, with being accompanied by another person. And I'm being accompanied this time by Herding Nomad, whose real name is Jessie, but don't tell anyone. And he's a calligrapher that found me sort of through a calligrapher friend of ours, Nicola Pang in California. And Jessie, aka Herding, is also from California. And he is going to be, the title of this piece is Smokin Js with Peer, Smokin Js with Peer, PH, and Herding Nomad. So, and he's going to be working on a J, initial, a capital, what do they call them? Decorated cap. He's working on a decorated cap with a J. Okay, now you can say hi.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you for giving me this opportunity, Pierre.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I've been a big fan of yours for a while, and so it's really interesting to be on your channel. But yeah, so I thought it would be good. I really enjoy doing decorative capitals. So I thought, since my name is Jessie, that J would be a good kind of way to go. And then I thought Smokin Js would be kind of a riff on you were taking P's.
Yep. and the P and the J are very similar. A J is essentially an upside down P and vice versa. And the problem with a J and a P is they're not symmetrical. God damn it. You know, they have this vertical thing and then this thing on one side of them only. So you have to deal with what are you going to do with the other side. And when you're doing something where you're fitting a square peg in a round hole, you know, you're fitting it within a square or a circle, you have to pay attention to that, you know, especially if the vertical line of the J is in the center of your square. You have to decide, okay, now what am I going to do with all the space on the side? Is that sort of what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
And that's what when I was doing my P's, taking a P, I was having the same problem, and to fix it, I could have just changed it to an R. That's the easy way out. Other ways that I have done is you can sort of slant it a bit, and you know, by slanting it maybe forward, so the top of the P is to the left of the bottom of the P, you fill up more space, but that looks sort of awkward. You can slant it the other way, and it's even worse. You can have the bowl of the P go over the top of the P and sort of curl around, and that sometimes fills up the space. I'm drawing these things on my side of the screen as I'm saying this, so it's not just, I don't have to require people to use their imagination. Only you, Jessie, have to use your imagination to know what I'm talking about. So, and as you can see, dear viewer, Jessie is a southpaw, but he's not a hooker, he's a pusher. He is holding the pen and the hand sort of the same way that I hold my pen and my hand. He's not doing the overhand routine. I'm going to try to see if and again, as guinea pigs, I've been working on with recently. Sometimes the sound doesn't work. Our sound seems to be fine, I think. Sometimes the picture doesn't work very well. Our picture seems fine, I think. The only thing I would change would be maybe right now you're writing on, you know, the very top left-hand corner of the page, and on the screen in the theaters back home, when this is on the big screen, people are going to see it on the top left-hand corner, except it's even going to be smaller almost. So maybe by doing that, by pulling it down, there we go, it's in the center of the screen. And you and I can work out ideas about maybe zooming in, using your camera to zoom in, or maybe having the tripod be closer to an actual J when you're working on it. If eventually you're only going to be focusing on one of those J's you've already written, we can zoom in. There you go. Now, how did you do that magically?
So what I use is actually a big drafting table that has an electric lift on it.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you move the table up. Oh, I would never have thought that. I used to have one of those until I loaded my drafting table with so much stuff. Drawers, heavy drawers, metal drawers that were filled with pens and all sorts of things, and eventually the plastic gear system broke on it, and so now I'm using this aircraft. It's a drafting table that I think was used to design airplanes or battleships. It's absolutely huge. You could sleep. You can put a double bed on top of it, and it's really quite neat. And it's meant to be almost vertical, but I don't write that way. I write almost horizontal. So there's I'd have to be a really deformed orangutan to be able to actually reach the top of the table. So I have that filled with all sorts of shit now too. So anyway, back to you. So what Jesse is doing here is he is the top hook of the J, the horizontal part, he is exaggerating. I mean, he's copying or using as a model a typeface that has that on it, but it adds extra space to the extra filling to the side of the letter that already has extra filling. It's the right-hand side of the J is still empty, So again, but you're filled up the top right-hand corner of the J. So it's the bottom right-hand corner that's going to be empty. And you're thinking of adding vines to that to fill that in?
Yeah, some way to give it kind of that balance, because you always have to have kind of balance, even though it's a asymmetrical letter. I feel like there's something that you can usually work on to give it some balance on the other side, so that way it's not so heavy.
One of the things I've done with a J is, and I'm drawing it out here for the audience, if you imagine a J, when I have to do a J in a monogram, and it's in the center of, let's say, an H or an M, and the J, the vertical line of the J is in the center, I sometimes, as it's coming down, just as it crosses its sort of midpoint, I'll pull it to the right, curve to the right, and make a little point, and then pull it back. And what that does, it fills in that area, and it allows me to sort of have a complex curve. So it's a nice way of nodding, as it were, to that space. Another way to make the J less unbalanced as it is maybe you have the tail of the J come down and not come back up again. It just has this graceful line going down, and then so that sometimes works. Your J though, you're adding the last thing you're working on right now is you're adding all sorts of foliage coming out of the J, and by having it spread apart there, you're sort of just ensuring that even more stuff is going on that side. And one thing you could do is maybe have the single stalk of the vine continue up until it's at the top of that curve, and then it can spread out. And then maybe cross the J and go the other way, cross the vertical J. So that's another way to sort of fill out, give less weight to the left-hand side, and then, so now at that point where your hand is right now, or where the point is right now, that's where you have the thing spread out. One will go down, and then maybe two can go off the other side. There you go. So that's a way to fill up that half. Right now your hand sort of is covering what you're doing, but when you move it, okay, good. Now the last one you made, the one that's at the bottom, you could have that one curl, just remain on the left side of the J, diagonal line of the J. I mean, that could remain on the left side. No, the one you were making, that one. Okay, the bottom curl, that one, yeah. Rather than having it be on the left of the diagonal, on the right of the diagonal, you could have it remain on the left side. So that, so that will be the J, and then the other two will be the decoration, or it'll appear the J. There you go. So that can stay there. And then the other two, that could be maybe secondary in terms of, okay, good. And then that one comes down from there. Good. So that's a way that might work. I mean, all of these are possible. There's no wrong way, I don't think, to do these things. There's only variations of doing them, and then how to, given a variation, how to make it work the best. Did Nicola Peng tell you how he got into calligraphy?
Yeah. It was an injury, right?
Yeah. He never was a calligrapher, and as far as I know, never thought of becoming a calligrapher until after his right hand was crushed in an accident where almost every bone and every tendon and everything that can be broken in your hand, or ripped or torn or whatever, was in fact ripped or torn or broken. And as part of his rehabilitation, he had to do some exercises with his hand. And he thought, well, since I'm stuck doing something, why don't I learn how to do calligraphy? So in 3 years only, from never doing it before, he has become an inspiration to me and to you, and also is now running a business doing this and teaching. And he's inspired me to learn about this stuff. As usual, I look at pictures and I don't read the captions or the books that go along with them. And when he would be telling me things like, oh, this sort of typeface came from this or whatever, he gave me all this fascinating history, and he was surprised that I didn't know any of it. And that's what happens when you don't read the books, you just look at the pictures. So Mr. Guinea Pig, one of the things too that I'm going to try to figure out how we can maybe do this differently. If there was a way, imagine your camera would be 10 inches to the right of where it is right now, and aiming back a little bit toward you. We would see the letter you're working on without your hand being anywhere near it. Is that something, do you think, that you could try? Not now, but you can try it in the future?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just that right now, I mean, when you put your hand down, I couldn't see a single thing that you were doing. I could just see your big old hand. And there's nothing wrong with your big old hand. Your hand is perfect. But it was just blocking your beautiful J.
Right. Nobody else can see what I'm doing.
Yeah. So that one of the people that I was talking with earlier today, guinea pig number 3, he surprised me. He's one of the few people I've seen recently who holds the pen way back on the, it's like he's like there. That's where he's holding the pen. And he's doing these drawings. He's not doing calligraphy, he's doing drawings. But it's really was nice to be able to see the pen, and he could, more importantly, it wasn't I didn't care about me. I mean, his drawing didn't care about me, but he was able to see his, like, I don't know how you can see what you were doing just now with your hand completely covering, unless you have eyeballs on the end of stalks like crabs do, or shrimp, or whatever they're, lobsters. It seems like you wouldn't be able to see what you were doing. Now, is this very uncomfortable for you to hold the pen like that? It might be.
No.
It might be. It might be when you're actually doing calligraphy, but here you're just planning things out. So maybe you don't need to have it be that way. So. So what are you seeing here? What are you thinking as you're doing these? Are some working better for you than others?
Well, I'm kind of keeping with the flow of the idea that you gave me here.
Okay.
About keeping it one stock over here, so that way you keep that. Because, like you said, like this gets into and it takes away from the letter form itself.
Yeah.
It almost makes it like
I wouldn't
you're
know.
Expecting something else to like come over here, like you're actually going to end up with like a B or something like that,
Yeah.
So I've just been trying to follow on with this, but I'm not, like, what I did here, I'm not happy with that, and I'm not sure which direction to go with.
Well,
that, really.
Here you have, I mean, it looks, that one that you just put
I'm talking about just the top stem, is what I mean.
What that looks like it could be a very decorative 7. You see?
Exactly.
I mean, so you could, make the top of the J, start at the top of the J and make a C. That's another way, a perfectly good way to make a J, where it's it's a curved line that comes down. It's maybe not the alphabet you're working on, but that's a way to fill up that space and to include the botanical motif at that part. One of the things
so you mean something kind of
like that,
akin to that?
Like that. It can be a point at the top. I mean, it can come down rather than curled like that. It can come down sharp. It can have a sharp point coming down, but that's because you don't want it to end up looking like an L.
That's true too.
Or a Q. I mean, that some people make Qs that look like that. So you could go back to the one that you just showed with the arrow. Okay. Now, what if you added from the vertical line, the very furthest most left line, left. There you go. That could be a right angle as you have it, but it could curl down and make a little floral routine thing happening there. Not too. I would have just gone. I would have just had it go in right that way. Yeah, just that. That's enough to give a nod to, like, ignore the other one that went below it. But that would be a way to make it a J. I think it'll add the floral element to the top, and then if you feel you want to, you could extend the horizontal line across the top a little bit more, like you did with the one above it that you haven't pollinated yet. whatever the word, you know, um, and um, and then you can play too with the angle. Do you want the J to be skewed, 30 degrees, or should it only be 20, or could it be 45 degrees? You can play around with that easily. Um, Take your hand away from that one right now. I see a grumpy man with a big frown on that one. You see, it's like the eye is the thing you just finished, and then his mouth is. You haven't added the nose. Maybe you don't see it, but
I don't. I'm sorry.
uh, think of the bottom of the J as a chin and a frown, and
Oh,
then you just add
so
the
then
nose,
got
and then you've got
something.
a. There you go. So what you want to do is you want to, when I design monograms and stuff like that, every once in a while I'm stuck with letters pairs that don't work very well, like an I and an S. And they wanted them on top of each other, and they wanted it to be a Roman lettering. And I said, it's going to look like a dollar sign. And okay, you can't get around an I and an S not looking like a dollar sign if you're using Roman lettering. And I came up with ways to try to disguise it, but none of them really worked. Another one I did, I don't remember what letters they were, but it ended up looking like 3/4 of a swastika. It was just one thing just wasn't quite swastika-like. And even if it was not entirely obvious immediately, it would have become obvious pretty quick. And then you can't see anything but a frowny face or a swastika or a dollar sign. So, especially if this is going to be a tattoo, pass it around to a couple of people and ask them if they see anything funny going on here. Because the last thing you want to do is get a swastika tattoo when you don't mean to. And there's probably a lot of swastika tattoos out there that are intended to be swastika tattoos, but we don't need to add to those either. I had something else to mention, and I can't remember what the heck it is. Now, do you use a computer at all to do any of this stuff?
I do have an iPad that I had before, and I've been thinking about getting it back out and messing with Procreate some.
Okay. Well, there an easy way to take a monogram like you're doing right now. Let's say you have one that you really like. Scan it in or take a picture of it and open it up in one of those things, and you can, select it and you can skew it. You can see what it looks like, another 10 degrees this way or that way. And that's a really easy way to check out. Maybe there's a nicer way to make it happen.
Right, or even mirror it.
Or mirror it, yeah. And the sort of thing you're doing right now, which is to adding the foliage to it, I've never been very good at this kind of stuff because I end up adding too many leaves or too few leaves, or the leaves are too big or too small. I haven't figured out the right way to do it, so I can't give you any official suggestions other than to keep working on it until you see one that works well.
Yeah, find the balance.
Yeah.
It's like making 1,000 drawings, or 1,000 bad drawings before you come up with one good one.
Yeah. Now looking back at the letter that you're working on right now, you added that second diagonal line coming down, which that essentially is the only non-botanical thing you have going on there, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Usually when I do what you're doing, which is to add floral elements or curlicues or something like that, if I got out my hedge trimmers and clipped away all of the floral bits, I'd want to make sure that the letter was still there. So in your case with that particular J, I might add that double line going up on the lower left-hand curl. So just follow along. I might have that other line be double. So that's what you're doing, is sort of, as you're going up to the top of that, you're sort of saying that's the letter J. The rest is fanciness. But maybe you don't need to do that. I mean, that's just what I do. Again, I'd have it go all the way to the top of that arc, though. There, like, and that way, if you got out your hedge trimmers, or it got to be autumn and fall and all the leaves and flowers fell off, you'd still have the J left. The J would still be there.
I see.
So, and these are just little, I don't know if what I'm saying is correct at all, but usually when I'm making lettering, I try to understand some logic, and I like the logic to follow through. Now, if you didn't make that double line, that double diagonal line, then I wouldn't have gone down that path with you. But because you used that double line, that doesn't have to be, it can do what you're doing there. Okay, now make it double again. Have that, but make that crescent coming up be also double line. It's connected at the bottom. It's joined at the bottom, but then it gets fat again. Like a standard. Again, I'm seeing your thumb, not the drawing. Okay, yeah, like that. And now you water it and give it Miracle Grow to add the rest of it. So, and another thing that you could do is, you print out, you write 3 or 4 different simple J shapes, and then you, in Photoshop or whatever, you cut and paste, and you have a sheet full of these things. And then you just try different foliage routines without having to restart all the time. It's fine to do what you're doing. It's just that it's like, if you want to count to 20 and you already counted to 10, why do you have to count to 10 from the beginning again? You're just so it's a way where you could maybe spend time actually working on the thing you need to work on. What were you doing with your hand right there? Were you shaking it like it was?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you find that you get writer's cramp a lot, or is it?
No.
Is that okay? Every once in a while, I get very tense when I'm doing a drawing, or I really, I'm working on a map or doing something that requires a lot of teeth gnashing accuracy. And I just hate it, and my teeth are clenching, and the lines I'm making are angular and straight, and everything gets all bound up, and and I find that I might have to shake my hand to try to get the blood back into it, because I've removed it all by clenching my fist so much. It doesn't happen very often when I actually use fountain pens, but it can. And it's not the fountain pen's fault, it's my teeth clenching is causing the problem, I think, more than anything else.
Right, yeah, and that's basically what it is I stop myself before I start to get a depth grip on the pin, because you always want to have just a light grip on it.
You want to have a light grip,
but
especially with what you're doing now, which is just, I mean, that's another a thing I could just tell you to do right now. What if you had to do, pick a J, pick one of those right now. Just point to the one you're going to use.
Go back.
Okay, you're gonna use that one. Okay, now I want you to look at that J, and I want you to draw it in 42 seconds. All of what you just did, all of those details, but in 42 seconds, which means you have to be fast. You can't clench down. You have to you can be a little goofy. You don't have to be exact, but by doing it that way, keep going fast, is sometimes the lines you make when you go fast end up being more graceful than when you're trying so hard. Okay, now draw the same thing except twice as fast again. And if you overshoot or undershoot, don't worry about it. It's just a way to loosen up. Okay, now, okay, good. Now stop. Now what I see there, I see that you're not pressing down as hard, right? It's a lighter touch. And I think that sort of thing is really helpful. Now, of course, it looks awkward. There's awkward things about it because you weren't thinking as much as you'd like, but by working fast, I think there are some things that are really good about that. The line, that curl that goes up on the right-hand upper side there is really quite graceful. Whereas the one that you did before that is not as graceful to my eye. You see that? Yeah, that's sort of bumpy. Maybe and the one below that is nicer. So I think what you could do, especially when you're just sort of planning this thing out, is to just work a little faster. And I wouldn't have thought about this, but when you started shaking your hand because you were clenching it so much, it makes me think that maybe you're holding the pen too tightly.
Right. Well, it wasn't that I was clenching the pin. I was stopping myself before I started to clench the pin.
I see.
And see what I'm saying?
Okay.
But what you're saying with the fast movement and making sure that you actually are able to flow better.
Yeah.
Makes a lot more sense too, and then it keeps that from happening as well. When
I would sell pens to customers, they would take a pen and they'd take another pen and they'd try that one out, and a third pen and they'd try that one out, and they'd always be writing very deliberate sentences about the dog jumping over the fox or whatever the hell they were doing, and I would watch them just stress out over how to make a beautiful D, or how to make, and all of their lines were perfect and everything. And I said, okay, I want you to take a letter. And I started dictating them a letter. And of course they couldn't keep up with me, but because they weren't worried about what they were actually doing, they ended up with much more, automatically the speed made the thick and thin of a flexible nib work. They didn't have to think about pressing down. It automatically happened. So sometimes speed, it may not be as accurate as you want, but it really helps you loosen up, and I think it ends up being more natural. You might make a more natural looking curve when your hand is moving quickly. Your arm is moving, not just your fingers. And so it's another example that you could do to practice. It is now 34 minutes, so I think I generally need to make sure that I don't run out of memory in my phone and power in my phone and everything else, otherwise the whole film might get lost. But did you enjoy this little conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sorry that you didn't get to see what I was doing over here, which the people at home can see that I was sometimes following along with you, and other times I was just scribbling, and sometimes I wasn't doing a goddamn thing. But I think maybe the next time we do this, we can, try out the different camera angle for you, and maybe figure out another way to incorporate this information. I don't even know how I'm going to end this sentence because my mind is going in too many different places. I suddenly was trying to think about how you can see my screen at the same time, but then it just adds more things, more plates that we have to keep in the air, more balls juggling.
Right.
Maybe that's not helpful. But it could be, maybe another time we just switch roles. You're recording the movie using your phone. I'm broadcasting with you on Skype. It's just the roles would be reversed, and this would be on your channel that the thing would end up, which is fine. I can be a special guest star on your TV show, So, and I think that would be fun. You need a little bit more Miracle Grow there. Those leaves they look a little thorny.
Yeah.
Rather than leafy. So add some more Miracle Grow there. I mean, some of them can be smaller, but by having a broader leaf some of the time, it doesn't have to be all of them. Again, I was watching a guy teach about how to draw trees, which I need help with sometimes, if not all the time, and he was one of the things he was talking about is variation, chaos, controlled chaos. There's never two things that look alike. So by altering the sizes, I think you'll end up with something that will look more interesting, but also can come in handy, because sometimes you don't have room for a big leaf, so you can throw a small leaf there. And the leaves also can cross, rather than staying only outside of the line. It can also cross the line or go behind the line of the letter or the vine that you're making, which adds more depth and more. Sometimes it helps. I often, when I'm doing letters, I will often suggest that you show the line going over another line. It's not just a silhouette, but it's cut out, so you can see that this vertical line of the J is above the horizontal line of the J, and that helps you actually understand the letter better. So anyway, we can now say goodbye, and I can upload this. If you have anything else you'd like to say to the viewers, I will, in the description somewhere, I can tell people how to see you on Instagram if you want. Or
Yeah.
you can also, in the comment, if I forget to do that, you can mention it in a comment underneath it. So I'm waving goodbye. I'm waving goodbye at my end. You can wave goodbye. Bye. Bye. Okay.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.